This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Love Letters Live with Janet Galen. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you, dear. And I want to introduce my guest today to Love Letters Live, Anita Hollander. And I'm gonna go to you pretty much right away because I'm just gonna say that you are a Broadway star and you have been performing all your life. And may I just go to you and let you say when you started, and we just talked about before we went here, you talked about good genes when I mentioned how gorgeous you are, your cheekbones. And- but I saw something else that I didn't know. And I have to say, I've known your name forever. I have known of you. And it's amazing to me how you can know of somebody and not know almost any details that are so important to who that person is. So genetically, can we start from way back? Your father was a cantor?
Yes. Before that, his mother was an opera singer who
Oh,
later sang with the Cleveland Orchestra Chorus. Uh,
okay.
by the time I came along, she was much older, and she was singing with the Cleveland Orchestra Chorus under Robert Shaw and Louis Lane. And on my mom's side, my mom's mom was in vaudeville.
Oh, wow.
And she died 6 years before I was born, and I swear to you, I'm the rebirth of my grandmother who was in vaudeville.
No, I'm not
So,
surprised at all. I
yeah,
mean, I've
it's a
seen it.
pretty,
I went and looked on YouTube at some of the things you've done, and you definitely have that echo of vaudeville,
it's an amazing thing.
isn't it?
Things I came into the world already knowing, and being, people say I was born in a trunk because that expression means, you just have it in your blood, and I
Right.
do. And my dad, yes, he was a cantor at the synagogue, and consequently, his four daughters, including me, we tend to sing a lot back at the temple a lot. I conduct a children's choir.
Oh,
When
I'm
I'm
so
not on
sorry.
stage, I'm conducting a children's choir at the village temple, and so we've all stayed in that realm, and we all sing. We sang together as a group, the four of us, in Cleveland growing up.
Oh.
Television, and yeah, I know, I saw that New Cleveland. Anyway, uh, we just
I am
we,
so touched by all this, and I'm so delighted. I mean, it's just making me so, when you see something and you know that there's a genetic history, you can tell. We can tell.
yeah, it's an amazing thing, and
But
I don't ever take it for granted.
you don't take it for granted.
No, I don't.
Oh, good, good. Because sometimes what you grow up with, I think that's true of most of us. It's the wallpaper.
Yeah, people just do take it for granted. I mean, I will say that growing up, I thought everybody that singing was easy, that
Okay.
everybody, it
So
wasn't hard
I
for
want to.
anybody to do it. Thus, as a choir director, I tell the kids I don't care how they sing, that it's that they should sing.
Okay,
And I
but
had
you
a
touched on
deaf
something.
choir member and a developmentally disabled singer in my choir. We had we have all kinds of kids in our choir because I think everyone should sing, whether they are told that they can or that they're
That's
good
good.
at it or whatever.
Well,
Singing is
you touched on something that has always been something I have noticed, and probably we all have. I think if I notice something, at least half the world does. But that is, people have their throwaway talents.
yeah,
That is to say, things that come so easy to them that they don't think of it as anything but natural.
yeah.
I mean, I've had people say to me of a certain, oh, I don't know how you do that. What? Just do it.
I know what
And
you mean.
in
Well,
particular, there are
when I
stories.
talked about being born in a trunk, this the quote was said about me um, because, and I know you were probably going to ask about this at some point, but because after my amputation, 4 weeks later, 2 weeks later, after the amputation, I went back to direct the show, to continue directing the show. And 4 weeks after the amputation, I was back on stage opening the
Can we
show,
back up?
in the show.
Can we back up?
I know, I know. It's just that that's the reason the guy said, well, she was born in a trunk, is because was something I,
Yeah, okay, but you in addition to being blessed with enormous talent, I think my mother would say no credit coming to you that you're either beautiful or talented, because you had nothing to do with that.
That's right.
What you do with it goes to your credit. And you have done so much. Can we start? You mentioned after the amputation. How old were you? What happened?
Well,
And start with what was your, I know I'm going crazy with wanting to know everything in a minute, but what was your first performance that was like a professional performance?
okay, so I was 8, well, yeah. Unprofessionally, when I was 4, I got up on stage at the Hungarian Benevolent Society that my family was going to a magic show at. The magician said he needed somebody to come up and maybe sing a song while he was setting up. And before my mother knew it, I had left my seat next to her, and I was on stage, and she's looking at me, and I'm singing Guys and Dolls. I was
That
singing,
counts.
I'll Know When My Love Comes Along in Guys and Dolls. The audience didn't know what I was singing because I was like, chemistry? What chemistry? I was doing the whole scene from the musical. But I was 4, and I wasn't that. I tried to say too many words at once. Thus, I stumbled all over my words, so nobody knew what I was. And I had a very low voice because I had nose on my throat when I was 4. No, I was a mess. Nobody thought I would ever make.
But you knew what you were doing.
I mean, with 4 sisters, I was the one who was the klutz. I was the one who was the mess. But at the age of 8, my mom, she was so wonderful with us. She took us to an audition at Music Carnival, a tent theater in Cleveland, which did professional equity shows in the summer, because thus the tent. So it was all professional equity, and they were looking for children for The Sound of Music. And she said, would you like to see what an audition is like? And I'm like, yes. And because I'd been dancing in my living room and just raring together.
So you were really self-propelled.
My mom knew from that 4-year-old appearance that I wanted to do this. And my older sister, Celia, who was really the one who had perfect pitch and really on top of it, smart as a whip. I just looked up to her and said, I'll never be like that. And we were pals. We were very close in age. And so we both went to this audition together. And then there was this callback. And I figured it was for Celia, for my sister, but it was for me. So I'm like, okay. And all we did was sing the first 4 notes of Do Re Mi, which I'd written on my arm, because it was new. Sound of Music was new at that point. This was the first regional production. So I went to the callback, and I thought, I'm so plain next to these loud, blasting children, you know, and very cute and but very loud. These kids were like blasty, and I was just singing the song, and they kept keeping me, and the other kids left, and and then they lined me up, and I got the understudy to Gradle.
Wow.
We couldn't believe it. None of us could believe it, except my mom probably could believe it. But this little girl who was Gradle, was kind enough to get German measles over one weekend. One weekend, and she said to me, "I'm so glad you get to do the show." Because she was happy to have German measles so that I could go on and do the show. And
Are you still friends with her?
No, I've lost contact with her. I look her up on Facebook. Ever since Facebook began, I've been looking for her. I will find her because I found one of the other actresses who played Marta.
Yes.
And then the next year, a year later, it was such a successful performance, and it had all Broadway people in it, and we were just the local kids. It was so successful, they brought it back the next summer, and they told me if I had grown 2 inches, I could play Marta. And I did. I moved up to have my own role, Marta. And the girl who I was so close with, who played Marta the first time, she moved up to Brigida. She and I are still in touch after all these years. That was my first professional job. And I was with Judith McCauley and Lawrence Brooks, and Wally Harper was conducting the orchestra, who went on to be Barbara Cook's conductor.
She was something.
Musical director for her shows. And I mean, I knew that this was like, okay, my career has started. At 8 years old, I was sure of this. And
it does seem to me that, when people want to know, how did you get into this field and this work? The issue, I think, for you is you could not have escaped it.
It really did feel like that the rest of the way, because all from then
on,
you
were born in that trunk and they kept it locked.
What? Sorry?
You were born in the trunk that they kept locked.
Yeah, they couldn't keep it closed. So yeah, it was great. And then I just went on to do, I did, it was very interesting. In Cleveland there was so much theater that I could get shows all the time. So outside of school, which I was also doing shows in, but there was the Cleveland Playhouse and the Curtain, which was the Curtain Pullers, and I got to be in there. And then I did a show at the Cleveland Playhouse the with the boy who played Charlie in the movie of the chocolate, Charlie and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Peter Ostrom, and I got to do something with him, and then I did Heights Youth Theater, and then Chagrin Valley Little Theater, and Clegg Playhouse, and then I got some commercials because they did commercials.
Well, how did you make the transition from that to New York then?
Well, yeah, it was a bit of a trip, but I went to Carnegie Mellon for college, and actually, before I left for college, I was fortunate to be 16 years old playing Martha Jefferson in 1776 at CVLT at Chagrin Valley Little Theater with all these adults who were at least 10, 15, 20 years older than me, and getting reviews, in Cleveland papers. I mean, so I had a great resume by the time, and I got an award from the OVS, Ohio Valley, something about theaters, a theater award for my acting in House of Bernarda Alba, which was done at the Halley Theater in Cleveland. I mean, theater like that isn't done in every city, and I got to play an incredible role, which got me an award. And then I had to come back from Carnegie Mellon to get my award and then go back, so I had to get a special dispensation because nobody leaves Carnegie Mellon once they get there. And they accept 35 people in their acting program, at least at that time, which is usually wheedled down to a smaller number by senior year because they would cut you out if you didn't stay up at a certain standard in your acting training. And that's all I wanted was that, because I had been singing all my life. I'd been up until then, I had been a singing waitress. I had sung for money. I had acted for money. I had really been making a career and had a full resume. So then I'm sorry. There's sounds in the background.
I can only hear you. So
Good. Okay. So I go to Carnegie Mellon. My dad passed away right after Yom Kippur in my sophomore year. So I had just gone back to school. I had spoken to him.
He was young.
And he died of a heart attack. That was 1975, and I was 19. 6 months later, I started to get pain in my leg and in my back. I figured it was because of all the dance classes and all the stuff you do at Carnegie Mellon. It's a rigorous training program that starts at 8 in the morning and doesn't end till 11:30 at night. Everyone there figured it had to do with wearing corsets in the shows and stuff. Each teacher had their own theory about what was wrong with me. I went to a chiropractor. That didn't work. Went to doctors. And then I started going to see doctors, and 9 out of 10 doctors said, there's nothing wrong with you. Lose some weight, you'll feel better, or stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah.
If I may, on what did they base that there's nothing wrong with you?
Well, in 1977, there were no MRIs. There were no scans. There was just X-ray. And nothing showed up in the X-ray of my back or my leg. And some just didn't even want to do any tests. They looked at me, you're healthy. There's nothing wrong with you. Literally just looking at me. Yeah. Well, as an actor in training, of course I looked healthy, but one or the other. But then
you're also fortunate in how you look and how you present yourself.
Well, maybe, yeah, I do present a lot of energy, and I have that threshold for pain that if somebody told me it was nothing, that was a kind of a relief. But this was 1976, and I was it was 1976 when I first started going to doctors, and it went 9 months of going to doctors, nothing wrong. I lost a lot of weight, and my skin started having a greenish tone to it. That all I remember is I looked in a mirror and I went, I know that I have those yellow tones, and the Eastern European sort of whatever but not green. What? Sorry.
Had a greenish tone?
It had I have an olive complexion, but this was turning green. This was not black olives. This was this And I thought maybe I was imagining it, but I was in pain, and I was doing shows. I was back at school doing these shows with high heels and corsets and big restoration costumes and big skirts and dancing and all this stuff, and I was in pain all the time.
So who finally detected what was wrong?
Finally, when the Cleveland Clinic was just horrible to me, I'm sorry to say, um, they argued over my bed between the neurosurgeons and when they realized that when they did that little hammer thing, I had no reflexes in my left leg.
Oh, so it was a nerve. They could tell it was
So they
nerve.
knew it wasn't responding. Yeah, and I was so happy that day. I'm going, yeah, you see, there's nothing there. It's just hanging there. My foot is not working. I was so happy that somebody suddenly noticed. The little hammer never made me so happy. Anyway, they still couldn't figure it out. They knew something was wrong, but they couldn't figure it out. And a wonderful, wonderful neurologist, Howard Tucker, was the one who had seen me earlier but didn't know what it was and sent me to the Cleveland Clinic. Now he was saying, there is something wrong. There's a blockage, but we don't know what it is because it's
How did they go from that to realizing that it was a cancer of some sort?
he sent me to New York in a snowstorm. In the snowstorm of 1977, they had to care. I was already on crutches at this point because I couldn't. They had traumatized my leg with all the tests, the back tests and the myograms and the discograms, and my leg had bent itself and it wouldn't stop. So he sent me literally to the chief surgeon at the Neurological Institute in Manhattan. Not the way I wanted to go to New York, but they carried me over the snow into the Neurological Institute, and the chief surgeon there did the opposite of an angiogram, an arteriogram. Angiogram goes up to your brain, arteriogram goes down, and they found it. And I was happy that they found whatever it was, but I didn't know what it was. And it was strange because I thought they had a biopsy. They gave me a biopsy, and at 21, I didn't know what a biopsy meant. I thought that was the operation, and now I'd be okay, and I'll go back home because nobody had told me anything. And after the biopsy, they transferred me. They said, we're transferring you to the oncology ward. In 1977, the word oncology didn't mean anything to most people. And
That's right, yes.
And they rolled me down, and they said surgery on Tuesday. But I already had the surgery. I had a cast on my leg, so I thought, what surgery? I already had the surgery. I get taken to the other building, Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. Now I was in the hospital, and I was sharing a room with 3 women who were middle-aged, 50 or over, and I was 21, and I overheard them talking about their mastectomies. I knew about mastectomies because my grandmother had died of breast cancer, so before I was born, the one that looked so much like me.
Yeah.
And I wrote in my journal, I think I have cancer, but I'm going to ask somebody. And a guy came to take bloods for this surgery that I didn't know what it was. And I said, excuse me, can you tell me what oncology means? And they were like, you don't know what it means? I go, no, could you tell me? They didn't tell me. So I heard it from the women. I heard it from my roommates who I never saw because they were behind curtains, but they were talking to each other. And I found out I had cancer that way.
And did that amputation surgery take place?
That wasn't the amputation. There was a tumor inside my nerve, and the doctor, the surgeon at Columbia Presbyterian was known for not amputating. He would save people's limbs. So he saved my limb by taking the motor nerve out of my leg, like from way up in my thigh down to my ankle, from my ass to my ankle is what I like to say. Removed the nerve, and did chemo and radiation. And I did have to sign documents saying there was no guarantee that I was done with this. And in fact, he left cancer cells in my leg thinking that the chemo and radiation would kill them. And 5 years later, I had a recurrence. So at the age of 26, that's when the amputation had to happen.
How did you, I know you must get asked this a lot, but it is so hard to fathom how you went from that. And I mean, I think we all have heard about, repercussions and impacts of having a limb removed. How did you manage to be back on stage in 4 weeks?
I love, everybody loves to ask how, because that's the big question.
Well, you
Um,
know why? The how is because most of us would linger a lot longer over a lot less.
well, it's interesting that I was blessed by, there's always a gift in everything that happens to everybody. And the gift for me was the first operation gave me the warning sign. And I went back to Carnegie Mellon 6 weeks after that surgery because I was 21 and I was gonna graduate with my class. I didn't care what it took. I had a brace on my leg and I was on chemo and then I was on radiation. And this was all, I stayed over the summer to be an assistant teacher for the summer program for high school students at Carnegie Mellon. Just, and you see, I did that because I got extra care and help from my voice teachers by assisting them during the summer. I
Oh,
got extra voice because after my first operation, I lost my voice. I think it was the trauma. I
oh,
couldn't,
sure.
no breathing. I
Oh,
had a tube down my throat and everything, but I couldn't produce a voice. And I was a singer, and everybody knew I was a singer, and I couldn't produce a voice. My breathing was off. So that summer, in between junior and senior year, while I was on chemo, I I got extra work with my fabulous voice teachers at Carnegie Mellon, and also passed on some of the things I was learning to high school kids who were watching me with a brace on my leg and no hair on my head and going, okay, let's do this exercise. I mean, I could speak. It was the singing that I was
no, I understand what you're saying.
at.
So
But
you,
this was my warning so that I knew that that I could lose this leg. And 5 years later, well, 4.5 years later, when the pain was starting to come back, I knew that was possible. So this amputation didn't happen like, one day I had, like my dad dying of a heart attack suddenly with no warning. I had plenty of warning. And that was the gift because when they told me that I had a recurrence, and I was in rehearsal for this show, for Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris. That was the show. I was already in rehearsals.
uh,
And I had the cast and the stage manager and musical director come to my hospital room, and I said, okay, listen to me. I've lived with paralysis in my left leg ever since the first operation. The doctor says that my leg was nothing different from an artificial leg because you don't feel an artificial leg either. So he says that once I am the PT, physical therapist say, once I have this operation, I can go back to rehearsals and we're going to get this show. We're going to make this show happen.
and their response to that was,
The musical director was like, Anita, you've never lost your leg. How do you know
oh,
that this is going to work? And the stage manager said to the musical director, excuse me, I know Anita. I've known her a lot longer than you. When Anita says she's going to do something, she's going to do it. So you just have to get used to it.
so
And
there
the
was
cast was like, okay,
no if about it. There was
yeah,
no if.
no,
I
it's
read
true.
someplace that you had said to somebody, I don't need two legs to sing.
That's right. And
Is that
I told them that on the first rehearsal I came back. I said, okay, they took my leg, but they didn't take my brain. I know exactly how this show looks in my mind. I'm going to stage this thing, and we're just going to. I only have 4 hours a day to rehearse, so we're not going to take breaks. If you need a break, just take one. But I'm going to stage this because they had been working on music while I was dealing with my amputation and the PT for 2 weeks, and that was like, I'm going to do this, and we just have to all really focus. I had in the casting cast two understudies who I put into the show because I didn't feel it was right for them to sit around and wait for something to happen. But I also knew I had a pain in my leg.
yeah.
So it was like, I need to have someone to step in. If I can't do the show, she'll not only have that song I gave her to do anyways, but she'll also have my song. So I had an understudy and
So
a female and a male.
you went back full force.
Yeah, the poor girl never got to do my role. And the musical director said that was really unkind of me. But you see, once I got back to the show and opened it, it was the momentum thing. I couldn't take a night off because I knew I might not get back up again. You know what I mean? It's like if I said to myself, hey, you're right, I'm exhausted. You go ahead and do do my part. I couldn't do that to myself because
By the way,
it would stop
if
the momentum.
if you can call it that, I would say that I have now known you for 25 minutes up close, and the energy that you have, it doesn't seem like you would ever lose momentum for anything that you wanted to do.
Well, it's drive. I was born with incredible drive.
So you have
I'll tell you,
taken it.
as a baby, I screamed for the whole first year of my life and climbed out of my crib and fell and got a concussion. I should still have a bump on the front of my head
My goodness.
because I was so determined. My mother tells me that I said, "How did I jump out of a crib?" And she said, "Well, you piled up, you were one, and you piled up all the stuffed animals, which we learned after you not to put stuffed animals
Right.
into the
Yeah.
crib. But you climbed up on them, just like we once had a hamster here. My daughter had a hamster who put shavings into the wheel, the exercise wheel, so it would stop the wheel, climbed up on top, and when we walked in one day, was sitting on top of the wheel with the top of the tank right here going, see what I did there? You know, that's what I did. I climbed up, jumped out of the crib, landed on my head, and that only way my parents knew there was something wrong was I wasn't screaming. And they knew something was wrong because otherwise I would have been screaming all night. That's how I got nodes on my throat by the time I was 4. I mean, I was I was a child who had places to go and people to see. That's another reason why I think I'm my grandmother, because her life got cut off before she was
Oh,
done.
yes.
And I feel like I came back to the world I was her coming back 6 years later going, I really don't need this baby stuff. I need to get going. Life is short. Get out of my way.
And we'll see about that as the years and years go on, about coming back as.
Yeah, we
Yes.
shall.
So you have taken all this, and with all that you're doing, and you've got a family, and you're a mother of a daughter,
Yeah.
one daughter, one son, what?
One daughter who is
One
now
daughter.
31. She just turned 31.
Wow.
And
Okay.
she's teaching up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, teaching second grade. Talk
Oh,
about a really difficult
wonderful.
year to
Yes.
start a
But
teaching
you've
job.
taken all this experience, and now you're working with people who have a variety of disabilities. What are you teaching?
Yeah, I'm an advocate.
Spend a couple of minutes on that, because then I want to talk about a love letter.
Oh yes. Well, I uh, uh, I am the national chair of SAG-AFTRA Performers with Disabilities,
I read that.
and I've been advocating for people with disabilities for over 40 years.
Oh,
Ever since I first had the brace on my leg, I was traveling for the American Cancer Society all over the country to show people that life goes on after cancer, and that uh, nothing has to stop you. And I was young at that time,
I can see
because
that.
I was
Yes.
right after I was 21, and I was really young, but I started writing songs about it. So the American Cancer Society would send me around. I would speak a little, and then I'd sing a little. Some
Uh-huh.
songs from my show, and which wasn't a show yet. It was these songs that I was writing along the way that became a show,
Well,
called Still
that
Standing.
could have been a whole career in itself.
Yeah, exactly. I was called a celebrity against cancer before I was a celebrity, so I was grateful. But they allowed my daughter to go to Disney World on her third birthday because they wanted me to speak at Disney World, and it happened to be her third birthday. So her life is
You're,
charmed. She lives a charmed life. But
you're so
so
unstoppable.
what?
You are so unstoppable.
Yeah, that was the kind of thing. And it was a great way to see the country, and for my daughter to see the country and my husband to see the country. We got to travel so much. And they thought it was very important that the survivors, the cancer survivors, and the people, the donors and stuff like that, to see that not only does life go on with your career, but you can get married, because I got married after I lost my leg.
Sure.
Cab drivers think that's very weird, that any man, was going to marry a one-legged person. Anyway, for some reason, cab drivers find that weird. But then they go, God bless you and all that. But have a daughter as well. So for me to go to all these places, I mean, it all started earlier before I got married. When I got married, they said, bring your husband along. When I had a child, they said, oh, you've got to bring your child along. And after a while, she started coming out on stage and singing the song "Mommy Is a Mermaid," which is the song I
Oh,
wrote
yeah.
for her before she was born, because it was for her think about when people would stare at us walking down the streets and stuff like that, or when we go swimming, that people are going to stare. So the song "Mommy Is a Mermaid" was meant for her to sing. And by the time she was 4 years old, we stuck her up on a piano and she sang it at the temple.
Right. Oh my goodness. So
So
you're
now we went to Disney World and 500 people in the audience, and she's like 7 years old, or maybe 6 or 7, gets wired up for the mic, wants a little makeup, a little lipstick, sure, why not? She goes out on stage and she sings "Mommy Is a Mermaid" for 500
you
people.
have a history, and it's ongoing because I can see that you're still young and still doing it all. Do you, and I'm going to ask you this only because I'm basically about love letters. Do you must have gotten a lot of letters in your life, I'm guessing. Do you write letters?
Oh, I'm a letter writer
Oh, I would
from
have
way
guessed
back.
that. Uh-huh.
I love handwriting. I love script. And from the time my third grade teacher gave me a B in handwriting, and I was like, "What's that about?" And she goes, "Well, it comes so easy to you." Going back to that thing about something that comes easy to you. She
Yes.
said, well, it comes easy for her, so she didn't have to put any effort in it. I'm going, okay, so give me an S, a satisfactory for effort, but give me the A, for heaven's sake.
Of course, of
Because
course. Oh,
I just love it. So I wrote
handwriting is king.
oh,
Yes. Let
it's
me ask you something. So if you were to write a letter right now, of course, I'm such a busybody that I listen to people, and I'm thinking a love letter to that girl who got the German measles. If you ever find her,
oh,
I'm thinking if it were me, I would sit down and I would write that letter right now, and I would address it and stamp it just with her name and stick it aside for when you find her.
that is a great idea.
So much
It's
about you is, your life is historically important in terms of theater and medicine
yeah.
and a whole bunch of other ways, I'm thinking.
Well, it's funny that you should say I should write a letter to her. I have boxes of letters.
I
I
bet.
had a song in the original version of Still Standing. It was called "Here I Stand," and because that's the main song of the show. And one of the songs is called "Letters from Abroad."
Oh,
Abroad,
near the
letters from
broad. Yes.
abroad, and
Yeah.
it's a letter. It's a song based on letters I sent home from Copenhagen when I worked in Copenhagen, and I toured Europe and all this stuff. And I would always write these aerograms, those blue things that fold out, and you have to
I'm
like
so
glue
glad
them.
you have all these. I mean, I'm so glad that you got the letter. Well, now, of course, we can write letters and make copies of them, which we should do. And, I can see that we're like really two of a kind in this
Oh
particular
yeah,
way. Because
definitely.
I have come to say that I hear people so often say, "Oh, I wish I had a magic wand." And I say, "You've got one."
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're saying these things, because in my song about 9/11, it's called "The Something Else." It's sung as a New Yorker, being in New York when this thing happened and seeing it off of my terrace. And I write at the very end, keep writing letters, stand your ground, and let your voice be heard. In the end, our greatest weapon is the word. And
Oh, yes.
you holding up that pencil is exactly what the end of that song is about.
Oh, I'm so glad. I should send you one of these. Okay,
I
we'll talk
love
later.
it. I don't know what on the top there, but I love it.
It's the little crystal that is part of man. I know I'm insane when it comes to pens. I think they're just things of such
Oh,
beauty.
I'm all about pens.
Oh,
My favorite is the precise
I love those.
razor tip.
Okay, I've been coming to New York every year for many years and spending time. And of course, this year I couldn't because of coronavirus. But I'm hoping that someday I'll get to again, and that we'll get together for
Oh,
lunch.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
So,
I'm easy to find. Right in the middle.
or you can come to San Francisco. I mean, who knows where life will
I
go.
was supposed to be performing in San Francisco in July at the
Okay, so when
Fool's
you get
Fury
close to
Festival.
that, you can come stay with me. Okay, we'll talk later. Okay,
Absolutely, because they are rescheduling it because of COVID. We couldn't do it.
course.
They're rescheduling me for next summer, so you better remember what you just said.
Oh, I know. And then, by the way, I never say anything I don't mean. And I have to tell you, you can't come now even because the air in California, you've been reading about.
Oh, yeah. It's
You can
probably
serve it, you can serve it with taco chips. It's
I'm
horrible.
I'm
People,
glad you're okay though. I'm really glad you're okay. Can I say one more thing about letters?
sure.
Probably one of the most important letters that I ever got was my friend who was diagnosed with AIDS. And he was a brilliant composer and lyricist. He wrote a musical of Sheila Levine is Dead and Living in New York, a musical out of that book. The It's such a great book. If you knew the 70s, it was very 70s. And he died. He got diagnosed, and he asked me, write a list. How did you, and you know the word how did you get from there to here? Meaning, how did I get from when I had cancer and losing my leg to thriving in New York City? How did you do that? He said, make me a list and I will follow it and I will do everything you did so I
Oh,
will survive. It's really was the toughest thing for me because I couldn't figure out how, and that's how Still Standing came about because it's
okay.
16
So
tools for
I
survival.
would say that people can look you up and they can Google Still Standing and they can find out a lot more about you.
Or
I
my
would,
website, anitahollander.com.
okay. Oh, and I want, okay, well, we can save this for later, but I didn't know if you were from the Hollander family that did the fur coats. There
I
was
didn't
that line in
know, we
Guys
didn't
and Dolls
Hollanderize it. Uh,
for some other dame.
well, the funny thing is that's from Guys and Dolls. You would
I
think
know.
I had
No, I
something to
know
do
every
with
word
that.
of that. Yes, so I was touched by the fact that that was the first thing you sang because there's not a word of that play that I don't know by heart. Okay, I'm going to thank you for doing this with me, and
Oh,
I
thank
hope
you.
we're going to be in touch again. So
Oh,
many things.
I'm
To
so glad that I've met you and both of you ladies.
thank
Thank you so
you.
much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just gonna, we'll talk later, and
Okay,
I'm going to say goodbye for now. And Love Letters Live. We'll talk to you with somebody soon. Bye.
bye-bye.